Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for October 6th, 2025. Today we are going to talk about interesting tidbits from General Conference that aired this past weekend. First off, the sustaining of church officers was, a few years back, moved from the Saturday afternoon session, where it had been held for many years, to the Saturday morning session. This change happened without any official announcement, leading to speculation that the unstated motive was to minimize the chance of people audibly opposing the vote. Well, it seems folks have caught on because there was an audible opposed shouted after Eyring asked if any were opposed. Let's listen.
As prophets, seers, and revelators, all in favor, please manifest it. Contrary, if any, by the same sign.
The whole sustaining vote thing is more performative than anything nowadays anyway. They want to see everyone raise their hands and say, "We think you are awesome," and they really do not want to hear about anyone who has any constructive criticism for them.
It's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true.
Reminds me of a quote by Adam Grant, a renowned organizational psychologist, when he said, "People who can't handle criticism are unfit to lead. Weak leaders fear dissent as a threat to their power. They silence their critics to shield their egos. Strong leaders welcome dissent as an opportunity for growth. They silence their egos to learn from their critics." As I've noticed the past few conferences in Utah during conference weekend, anyone with a ticket to conference can also ride UTA services for free, including bus, Trax, S-Line, streetcar, and Frontrunner. I think it would be wildly fun to get a ticket to conference and then just use it to tour downtown Salt Lake without having to worry about parking. Who's in? KSL, a church-owned news station, put out the following announcement. Due to our coverage of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference, sports fans won't be able to view NBC Sports Notre Dame football on KSL TV. Viewers can go to Cozy TV and Peacock to view the game at this time. Sorry, football fans, Mormon Jesus takes precedence. The Salt Lake Tribune also got in on the fun with this ad that, I'm guessing accidentally, said, "Explore the news and cult," complete with a picture of General Conference. One ex-Mormon commented, "It's raining right now, and my Mormon friends on social media are like, 'Oh my gosh, guys, God is blessing us with this rain for watching conference. He loves us.'" Do I have to break this down? Of course I do. The most significant issue is that if a good event is a direct transactional blessing for a good behavior, what does a bad event signify? Does it mean the people affected are less faithful, less loved, or being punished? Utah, the Mormon mothership, has been in a drought for a long time. What does that say? Now back to the actual conference. I listened to all of it, no joke, and for the most part, it was a whole lot of the same old, same old. Let me know if a talk-by-talk breakdown would be helpful. If so, I can work on that over the next few weeks. A few things that did stand out. First of all, I noticed 2 times, there may have been more, that men quoted women. I do not know that I have ever noticed this before. I realize it's a somewhat trivial breadcrumb in light of all that women don't have when it comes to Mormonism, but it did stand out to me. I also noticed that they sang a lot of songs that I did not recognize. I think the new hymnal is getting a lot of use. There are certainly plenty of folks who are excited to finally have new songs to sing. Overall, the talk that seems to be getting the most attention, much of it not favorable, was given by Ronald Rasband in the opening session. I was listening to the talk and realized quickly that he seemed to be quoting, sometimes verbatim, the article that was mysteriously removed from the church news this past week. I reported on the mysteriously removed article on October 1st. The link to that video will be in the show notes for anyone who hasn't heard it yet. The article that disappeared was written by Easton M. Hartzell, who is an intern for the church news. His church news bio says he served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the California Santa Rosa mission from 2019 to 2021. He is now pursuing a degree in journalism from Brigham Young University. Easton started the Study and Faith podcast, where he discusses church history, doctrine, and culture with scholars and historians of the church. In his free time, Easton loves studying all things church history and sharing the gospel on his Instagram account, Finding Christ. Here are the phrases I could find from the article that were used by Rasband. Rasband said, in 1994, a year before the proclamation was presented, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles discussed how society and governments were pulling away from God's laws of family, marriage, and gender. But that was not the end of what we saw. President Russell M. Nelson later explained, we could see the efforts of various communities to do away with all standards and limitations on sexual activity. We saw the confusion of genders. We could see it all coming. The 12 determined to prepare a document, an official proclamation summarizing the church's position on family. During that year, these apostles, seers called of God, prepared a declaration about the family. And similarly, the Dissapeard article said, the 12 received both doctrine and policies, considering those things that could not be changed doctrine and those things that possibly could be policies. They discussed issues they saw coming, including an intensified societal push for gay marriage and transgender rights. But that was not the end of what we saw, Elder Nelson explained. We could see the efforts of various communities to do away with all standards and limitations on sexual activity. Sounding familiar? We saw the confusion of genders. We could see it all coming. This extended discussion, along with others over a period of time, led to the conclusion that the 12 should prepare a document, perhaps even a proclamation, outlining the church's stand on the family to present to the First Presidency for consideration. Then, Rasband said, President Dallin H. Oaks recalled, they prayerfully turned to the Lord for what they should say and how they should say it. They presented the First Presidency the proclamation. Presidents Howard W. Hunter, Gordon B. Hinckley, and Thomas S. Monson for their consideration. Just months later, in March 1995, President Hunter passed away and President Hinckley became the 15th president of the church. The proclamation was now in his hands. When would be the right time to make this declaration to the church? And the Dissapeard article said, Sister Dew told Gardner the proclamation was reviewed and officially completed and approved by the First Presidency in March of 1995. President Hunter passed away on March 3rd, and President Hinckley became president of the church on March 12th. Sister Dew explained to Gardner that President Hinckley then began to pray to know when the best time to release the proclamation was. Next, Rasband said that time came 6 months later, days before the September 23rd General Women's Meeting that preceded General Conference. President Hinckley and his counselors met in council with the Relief Society General Presidency. The sisters, like the apostles, had been weighing concerns about women and families. They had focused the upcoming meeting on families. President Hinckley was scheduled to address the women at the gathering. He had been pondering the direction of his remarks. As the discussion progressed, he referred by name to the newly created but not yet public, The Family, a proclamation to the world. Was this women's meeting the right setting to make the decisive declaration about family? General Relief Society President Elaine Jack later explained, we didn't know what the proclamation on the family was at the time. We could tell by the title, but we felt anything on the family would be a positive thing. It felt very positive that we had members of the Quorum of the 12 that were receiving revelation. Elaine L. Jack, who was serving as Relief Society General President at the time, later reflected that the decision to read the proclamation at the women's meeting was made just 3 days earlier in a private council with the First Presidency. And the Dissapeard article read, the First Presidency warmly received the sisters and asked detailed questions about women's needs, family circumstances, curriculum, and economic challenges. The Relief Society Presidency shared what they were seeing worldwide. President Hinckley then raised the possibility of reading a proclamation on the family at their meeting, but worried it might overwhelm the sisters' program. Sister Jack and her counselors assured him they would gladly shorten their own talks to accommodate it. Rasband then said in his talk, the Relief Society meeting that Saturday was historic. President Hinckley introduced the family proclamation with these important words. With so much sophistry that is passed off as truth, with so much of deception concerning standards and values, with so much of allurement and enticement to take on the slow stain of the world, we have felt to warn and forewarn of standards, doctrines, and practices relative to the family which the prophets, seers, and revelators of this church have repeatedly stated throughout its history. He then read the proclamation in its entirety. And the Dissapeard article said, Elder Dallin H. Oaks, present in that meeting, told the sisters that they had just witnessed, that's right, an historic moment, as President Hinckley received and acted on revelation about when and where the document should be introduced. In President Hinckley's address, Stand Strong Against the Wiles of the World, he acknowledged women in diverse circumstances and read from a single mother's letter, framing the moment he declared, and it's going to be the same thing that Rasbands said, "With so much of sophistry, we have felt to warn and forewarn." He then stated, "In furtherance of this, we of the First Presidency and the Council of the 12 Apostles now issue a proclamation relative to the family," and he proceeded to read the proclamation. My guess would be that the Dissapeard article was pulled because Rasband didn't want his talk upstaged by an intern's article. Why do you think it was pulled, and why do you think they are so similar? Overall, Rasband's talk reaffirmed the proclamation and further marginalized LGBTQ people. One Redditor described it this way: "I'm disgusted. At a time like this, when trans people are being demonized, harassed, and threatened more than ever, the church decides to double down and spread that hate. I'm really angry. I have many trans loved ones and am a proud member of the queer community, and hearing this gender confusion stuff is infuriating. Transgender people are literally being labeled as terrorists, and the church decides that the world needs a message about conforming to gender roles? What about God protecting agency and choice? F that. The Mormon church doesn't have the slightest inkling of what the pure love of Christ is supposed to be." And I have to agree that Rasband's talk was awful. I'm sure he felt vindicated, though, when Oakes stood up at the very end and also talked about the proclamation on the family. Oakes started out his benedictory talk, though, by saying this. I will cut out all of his pregnant pauses so you don't have to listen for as long, because I care.
My loving brothers and sisters, thank you for your prayers in my behalf. I have felt them. The doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints centers on the family. Essential to our doctrine on the family is the temple. The ordinances received there enable us to return as eternal families to the presence of our Heavenly Father. As of the April 2025 General Conference, President Russell M. Nelson had announced the construction of 200 new temples. He loved to announce new temples at the conclusion of each General Conference, and we all rejoiced with him. However, with the large number of temples now in the very earliest phases of planning and construction, it is appropriate that we slow down the announcement of new temples. Therefore, with the approval of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, we will not announce any new temples at this conference. We will now move forward in providing the ordinances of the temple to members of the church throughout the world, including when and where to announce the construction of new temples. The portion of my talk that I have just delivered was written after the death of our beloved President Russell M. Nelson. What follows now was written and approved weeks before, but it still represents my teachings inspired by the Lord.
Wow, a few things I heard there. First, he did sort of make fun of Nelson, almost like Oakes was saying, that silly old man just had to announce temples, but we all thought he was out of control. He even laughed after. He then tacitly admitted that they have announced more temples than they know what to do with or can even build. Side note, I have some temple news that I hope to announce later this week. I have found some documents and am compiling some interesting facts about an upcoming temple. Oakes then said, "We will now move forward in providing the ordinances of the temple to members of the church throughout the world, including when and where to announce the construction of new temples." Is he saying ordinances will be offered in a different way for people who aren't and won't be near a temple anytime soon? Is he saying they will no longer be announcing temples at conference? I found that entire statement so strange. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments. Oakes then made an entire meal out of the fact that the first part of his speech was written after Nelson died. Is he gloating that he waited until Nelson was dead to talk about how the temple building had gotten out of hand? Also weird. And then he made just as big a deal about the next part of his talk having been approved by the now deceased prophet and how it was inspired of God. And then Oakes went on to pontificate about the family proclamation, talking about how traditional families are the only place to find real joy joy, and that Mormon women need to start popping out babies at a higher rate again. My thoughts are that if Oakes really wants bigger Mormon families, maybe he should use his vast wealth to address some of the following problems. The cost of food, healthcare, and particularly education and childcare are high and rising, making a large family financially challenging. High housing costs and rents are repeatedly cited as a factor that causes couples to delay or limit childbearing. In expensive markets, like Utah, families may feel forced to choose between investing in a house or investing in more children. Historically, fertility rates have temporarily dropped during periods of economic decline, like the Great Depression, and also fell sharply after the 2007 Great Recession, suggesting that a weak economy and lack of financial stability influence family planning. The economy right now? It's not great. Oakes also needs to mind his own business. Couples can decide how many, if any, children they have. If you want me to dive deeper into what was said at General Conference, just let me know, and like I said, I will break it down talk by talk. And last up today, let's go to this great quote that says, "Nobody told the people raising us or the churches tasked with developing us spiritually that you don't create strong, confident people through fear and shame. Or maybe they just didn't care if we grew up strong and confident." Maybe that wasn't actually their objective. And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.